All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Totally Baseless. This is episode 8. Today I'm joined by, I have a co-host today. Will Ohman's here. How you doing, man?
I'm good, man. How are you, Chris?
Good. So Will and I are going to get into, we have a good one for you today. Now, some might say it's a thankless job, and the only time you hear about them is when something goes horribly wrong. And you never hear anything or anybody sing their praises when they're doing a great job, which in my
left-handed relievers. No, that's not it.
No, not quite this time. Not this one.
Oh, okay. It's the other thankless job.
The other thing. And of course, you never hear anyone sing their praises when everything goes right, which in my opinion is most of the time. So, of course, we're talking about Major League Baseball umpires. Today's episode is quite literally the Ump Show. And I'm very, very happy to introduce you to former Major League umpire and crew chief, Ted Barrett is here with us today. Ted, how are you, sir?
Oh, I'm doing great. Thank you. And it's exciting to be on with you. And it is a thankless job, but it's a good one.
There's so many memories and there's so many great stories that I know that you guys have. I've spoken to a couple umpires and you guys, first off, you have to have a hell of a sense of humor, deal with what you guys deal with, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I always said if I couldn't laugh, I'd cry. But my first went to the big leagues in 1994 and then stepped off the field after the 22 season. And really now just kind of sitting back and reflecting on some of the great stories. When you're in the middle of it, sometimes it's not so funny, but then when you could get away from it and step back, you could see the humor of it. And speaking of funny, it was always one of the funniest guys I know is your co-host today, Will. But then to see him coming in from the bullpen, he was serious business. But then to see him after the games or when I saw him in the off season, it was always laughs.
That's fantastic. Now, Will, I'm going to let you start this one off. I know you and Ted go back, so floor is yours.
All right. So Teddy Ball Game, as I call him, and some of our friends call him. We've known each other for almost 25 years.
Yeah, I think so.
And to speak of the fact that I was serious business when I came out of the bullpen, I had to be serious because I was like the least qualified person to be on a major league field. So I had to try everything I could just to survive that day. You told me one time that you'd tell guys I was funny, and they're like, "That guy, he never speaks."
yeah, I've never seen him smile.
And that's the thing is on the field, I didn't speak at all actually between the lines. Even when there was a pitching, a mound visit or whatnot, it was usually just nods and grunts, very Tim the Toolman Taylor. But then as soon as I crossed back over, I was me again. But I had to have that level of concentration. So Teddy would try to sing my praises to other people, but he had nothing to validate that with. So good time.
I could have given him the heads up on your routine when you came in.
Oh, that would have been really helpful.
The umpire,
because I used to get so much crap for that.
But it's kind of cruel of me, and I apologize, but I used to get entertainment out of it, watching it happen. So Will would come in, and I remember when he was with the Cubs, there was a point of emphasis of making sure we started the innings on time because baseball wanted to speed up the games, and the 3 minutes between innings for commercials weren't going to be shortened. So they wanted to make sure we started the innings on time. Well, traditionally a guy comes in, throws 8 warm-up pitches, and then throws the ball around, gets on the mound and goes. Well, Will was just very efficient. I think you'd throw 3 or 4 pitches. So he spent a lot of time digging the mound and getting it ready. Well, the umpires are standing there going, "Oh man, this guy's taking forever. And he's going to throw 8 pitches." Well, they start yelling at Will, "Throw the ball." But Will is like, "I'm good. I'll have the 4 pitches thrown down and you'll be waiting for me before you can even go." But watching the plate umpire, and I know what he's feeling is he's starting to boil a little bit, and then he starts yelling at Will. So Will hasn't even thrown a pitch yet. He's getting yelled at by the plate umpire. I always got a kick out of that. But I could have given my guys a heads up and said, "Hey, leave him alone. He'll be ready on time." But
it took about 2 years, honestly, for me to work my way through all of the crews. and it was like, and every single game was the same thing. Because I'd have to work my way through all of the plate umpires and just be like, yeah, I was meticulously getting the rubber ready and getting the landing spot ready because I was only going to throw 4 pitches. And these guys was just like, hey, let's go. And I just look at him, I go, 4. It's 4. That's all I need. And then oh, okay, now I'm on the program. But then it was kind of a, let me see it. I got to see it to believe it type of thing.
Right.
And then after about 2 years, I never heard from him again, because I guess word traveled. This guy's a clown show, but he's a quick clown show, so we'll let him.
He works fast. We love him.
Oh man, I wanted to ask a little bit about, now, Ted, you were behind the plate for 2 perfect games, right? It was David Cone and Matt Cain, I believe.
Yes.
Now, here's something I always wanted to know. Just as a fan, I watched both of those games as they happened. As a home plate umpire, now you're retired, so I figure, you can tell me to go to hell or if I'm right or not, but does the zone expand a little bit when you realize somebody's throwing a perfect game, or are you just giving them the same zone the whole time? Or I've just always been curious about that.
Yeah. So, the game's changed so much, but that's a good question. But if you go back to 1999, Jim Reynolds says it best. In the days when we first came up, the goal was to go out and be consistent. And now it's changed because of technology. Now you've got to go out and be accurate, which is completely different. What I mean by that is, we would give guys a little bit off the plate, especially when the catcher set up out there and hit it. But you wanted to be consistent. And because of that, also, you wouldn't go inside so much because the guy's got to protect. And so the inside part of the plate, you really had to hit the plate. There's just a whole thing we can go into, kind of the art, there was an art to it, to working home plate. And now it's just completely changed because everything's scrutinized. But if you go back to 1999 and David Cone's pitching, you can go back and watch the replay and say, yes, I gave him some pitches that were off the plate, but that was kind of the way the zone was back then.
Yeah.
But then the temptation is, hey, this guy's got a perfect game going. Let's expand the zone and see if we help him out. This was a situation where you had to be completely accurate because you knew each pitch was going to go back and be analyzed. And so if I was to give a pitch that was, 4 inches off the plate, they would go back and look at it and say, well, look, the umpire helped him. But I think a worse sin would be to ball a 3-2 pitch that was really strike 3, and now it cost him the perfect game, or a 2-2 pitch becomes ball 3, and now the guy gets a base hit. So there may have been some, some bias in your brain that says, make sure you don't miss a strike. But now that's every day in the major leagues for a plate umpire. And it's really, really difficult to go out there and be perfect. As a matter of fact, it's impossible, I think. And so the perfect game was kind of a preview from that in 1999. And even going back and watching old films, and I know Will goes back and watches when he first came up, the zone was vastly different than what it is now. But that's the pressure that was on plate umpire, is just to make sure that a ball's a ball and a strike's a strike, because you don't want someone to come and say a guy got something he didn't deserve.
Wow.
So to that, like when I came up, the best thing that everybody who's listening can kind of imagine or help visualize what the strike zone was versus what it has become is your iPhone sitting in your pocket. If you turn it sideways in landscape mode, that is essentially what the zone was. It was not, it was horizontal versus now if you turn it, normal, it is much more vertical now. And to Ted's point, there was a relationship between the pitcher and the umpire, the catcher and the umpire, those 3 guys working in concert, that was, hey, let's all get on the same page and let's be, kind of one unit, and we'll be in the dance together. And you kind of got in a rhythm and a flow. Like pitching is disruption of rhythm and timing for the hitter, but you want to be in rhythm with the umpire. You want to be in rhythm with the catcher, so that you keep hitting the same spot. and the umpire who is going to be determining whether or not that is a strike, if you consistently hit that spot early on in my career, well, they wouldn't give the strike as much as they would say that pitch keeps getting hit. It must be where he's going. And then it's a subliminal, perhaps, thing where it becomes a strike. It's not given, but it becomes something.
Yes.
And there's vast examples of hugely expanded zones. Everyone thinks of the Levon Hernandez, Kevin Gregg game. But I think it was much more subtle than that, because there were many times as a young player that I would come up and the zone was actually intentionally pinched by umpires where they'd see what a rookie was made of. And I got balled on strike 3 numerous times where I was walking off the hill knowing it was strike 3, and then heard silence. And it was like, okay, I'm going to go back up there. I'm going to get this ball. I'm going to keep my head down. I'm not going to complain, because otherwise nothing is a strike. So again, just back to kind of Ted's point, it went from being consistent to being accurate to a point where, like I've known Ted for almost 25 years. I know zero computers that have a good personality aside from maybe the Whopper in war games.
And we know what happened there. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Do you want to play a game? But all the human beings I've met that were umpires, at the end of the day, they're people, and they're good guys, and you can have an actual conversation. So the next day you'd be like, hey, did you have that out? Did you have that up? You can have a conversation on it. But again, I just back to it. I think it's a rhythm thing that was much more of an art form, like Ted talked about.
Yeah, definitely. And you mentioned the catcher. That was a component of it too. The catcher's always going to battle for the pitcher to get pitches, to get strikes. And so he would ask, hey, are you seeing that all right? Or did you have that just off? And, I would sometimes say, yeah, you know what, maybe I need to take a better look at that. My way of saying that might have been a strike, that might not have. And those are the type of conversations that lead you to, hey, maybe I can call that. Maybe I'm not going far enough. But like Will said, and he said it earlier, we were talking off air, nothing ever happened. Yelling at an umpire never got them to change their mind or make their zone bigger. But those type of conversations could lead an umpire to say, maybe I'm not going far enough and I need to give him that pitch. And it used to be too, where the hitter was, that's what he's calling a strike. So that's the strike zone today. So I've got to go get it. And as long as he's giving it to my pitcher, there's nothing to be said. Now they run back and look at the computer. And I knew we had turned a corner when I think it was around 2021, and a guy had a no-hitter going into the late innings. When a guy had a no-hitter going, and especially a perfect game, you would never hear a hitter complain, the offensive team, of that pitcher that had the no-hitter going. Because the pitcher in the dugout's like, keep your mouth shut.
Oh, yeah.
He's calling that, and let's get him to keep calling that. So you just swing at it. But now it's changed to the focus of the hitter is like, I'm worried about my at-bat and not even cognizant of the fact that my pitcher has a perfect game going. Maybe I should just shut my mouth and hope that this zone keeps going the way it is. They actually start complaining about that's not a strike. And that always amazed me that we got to that point. And I don't know, Will, if you saw that at all at the end of your career.
No, I saw it. And I had, when I was coaching in the minor leagues, my manager said something, ex-big league catcher Dan Billardello, and he would talk to the umpires, and he would get a good rapport going with them. And ultimately, if he had to argue a pitch, knowing full well that if you argued balls and strikes, it was an ejection, he'd come out and go, look, I'm not arguing this. I'm just telling you a status report. He's like, if you're in mono, if you've got one ear just blowing up and a team is upset at you, so be it. He's like, but now you're in stereo, and now you've got both dugouts chirping, and now we have a problem. He's like, because everybody's upset. And that's where we've gone to. We've almost manufactured this space where the umpire is under heat from both sides at all times, always.
Okay, so for example, I tell people, it's kind of like, I guess one of the experiments of, Pavlov's dog, or, the ones where they zap people for making the mistakes. It was like on the job training when you first come to the big leagues. If you call a pitch above the belt, when I came up in the American League, and for viewers that don't know, we were American League and National League staffs. We were separated until 2000 when we came together. And there was a lot of talk about difference in strike zones, and it was a lot more subtle than what people let on. A lot of that goes back to the 70s, where the umpires wore the outside protector of the balloon. They would sit up higher, so they said the American League had a higher strike zone. But 1986 was the last outside protector worn, so that by the mid 90s that had kind of gone away. But
and to be fair, we've talked about this before, you and I. The balloon actually offered the best zone because the umpire was completely protected.
Yes,
the umpire did not have to hide on the inside shoulder of the catcher to not get hit.
Yeah, he could work over the top of the catcher, or if the catcher went in, it wouldn't pinch him off. He could actually go outside of the catcher because he was better protected and not exposed. Yeah, so Will, you're absolutely right. But it was like automatic feedback. If I called a high pitch, which was a pitch at the belly button back then, you got screamed at. So it was like, okay, don't call that. And because the pitcher didn't want it up there, the pitching coach didn't want it up there, the hitter wanted it up there because he could whack it. And so we really didn't go above the belt. And when I called a ball above the belt, nobody would yell. So it's like, okay, I guess I'm doing a good job. And the same thing with the low pitch. I think it was 1995 when it was changed to the hollow of the knee. The wording got changed. So we had to lower it a little bit. And if you called one around the ankles, the team was screaming. So it was like automatic feedback. Don't call that.
Yeah.
But you called pitch at the bottom of the knees. You were getting it right. You weren't hearing much. Now, to a young umpire, they don't have that kind of feedback that they can trust, because people are just yelling just to yell now. Not necessarily them being wrong. So that's tough too. Or they're going back and looking at the box on the iPad in the dugout, and they're yelling at him. That thing may or may not be correct anyway. So it's really hard now for an umpire to establish what zone should I be calling. And then you have the third party sites that come out with these umpire grades. Yeah. And what's the accuracy of that? There's no vetting of that. It's a couple of college kids in a basement is what I was told. And so, it's maddening. So an umpire gets, at the end of a major league game, he'll get a report from Major League Baseball the next day, zone evaluation, saying what pitches he should have called, should not have called. And then you've got this third party group coming out with their scorecard. And then you've got the TV box. And what you have is three different things that are very much different. So there's three different ways they're getting evaluated. Which one do they try to play to, and which one do they try to perfect? And people will say, well, that's close. They're very close. And it's like, yeah, but 2 inches in baseball is a lot. Pitches 2 inches outside is definitely a ball. But if the measuring system is showing that it's a strike, so that's the frustration the guys are dealing with.
No, I believe it. I mean, and for me personally, I hate the box, because the box, it can't be accurate. When it's the same size box for Aaron Judge as it is for Jose Altuve, something's wrong there. That's just my opinion. But I did want to ask really quickly, getting back to catchers and the low strike. I don't know, was this going on in 22 before you retired, with the catchers just yanking balls from the dirt back into the strike zone, trying to steal that low strike? And if not, I'm sure you've seen it now. And what do you think about that? It makes me laugh. But
well, I'm glad you asked, because it's a misnomer. So when I came up and when Will came up, a pitch that was jerked in any way, shape, or form, we just called it a ball.
Sure.
Because you're telling me that you thought it was low and you're yanking it up, or you thought it was outside and you're yanking it in. So it was easy. If you do that, it's a ball. Sure. And so they would stop doing it.
And it was hard to get a pitch that you missed location on. Like if I was going out and I missed across the plate, I could be center cut sometimes. If the catcher had to reach, that was a ball.
Absolutely. Yes. Because you missed your spot. Mm-hmm. And so then the evaluation started to come out. And so some umpires, and you see this all the time now, a pitch that's dropped. You could throw a pitch down the middle that hit the catcher's glove and kind of popped out, hit the ground. That pitch was a ball because he didn't catch it. Now I see pitches going to the backstop. The guys are calling strikes because they don't want to get marked down. So what was happening is guys would get their score the next day from the computer, and it would show that, well, that actually was a strike, even though the guy yanked it up for some reason, which was at the bottom of the zone. He yanked it up. And so guys started saying, you know what? I'm going to call the zone and try to score well, despite what the catcher does. And that's what it's turned into. And when the catcher jerks a pitch like that, it makes it really hard for an umpire to guess right. So the guys that just catch the ball and stick it, they're giving the umpire a better shot. But then what happens is you have commentators or people that do these the scoring of the catcher, how many strikes he steals, how many pitches he gets that are called. I want to see the graphic of how many times they make the umpire miss because they're jerking the glove. Yeah. Now, in the catcher's defense, I'll say this. Everybody's throwing 98, 100 miles an hour in cutters and things like that. It's got to be really hard to stick a pitch. So I think some of the catching with the glove coming up is part of just trying to catch it without it hitting the ground. So I give them a little bit of leeway on that. But they're making it really, really difficult for the umpires to get things right.
Interesting. Well,
so to Ted's point, and he and I have gone in depth on this actually a couple of times, you know, as soon as the balloon went away and the umpire could not stand on top and get the downward angle of what is actually on the plate or not, and they started to have to hide behind the inside shoulder of the catcher. There was one pitch in particular that became very, very open to interpretation, and that would be the low and away pitch, because Ted has described to me that that's the most difficult thing to see because A, you're parked inside, B, you're judging where it crossed the plate. So that's now 3.5 feet in front of you and low, blocked by the catcher. And so you're having to judge in space. Very similar to what a hitter has to contend with when you watch the pitching ninja videos and you watch the two balls deviate and you go, pitching or hitting is really, really difficult. Well, umpiring, and you know, a 98 mile bowling ball sinker to the outside part of the plate where you're blocked from view in space ahead of you 3 feet. I mean, that's no easy task. And then you get down to the mathematics of it and you look at it and you go, on the worst scorecard, a guy who saw 300 pitches that night is probably plus 95% accurate, probably closer to 97, 98, 99. If he missed 3 pitches and he gets a crap grade and everybody's all over him, they're not taking into account that the television angle is offset. That's why right-handed sinkers look filthy and left-handed sinkers look like they do nothing, because everything's the camera's parked to the right side of the pitcher. Mm-hmm. Okay. That's why left-handed sliders look absolutely disgusting. And, you know, and right-handed sliders, not as much, just because of the visual interpretation of it. Then they added the box, like you said, Chris, which is arbitrary at best. Mm-hmm. And all that did was create fanfare argument. Okay. So you have all this stuff. And really, to Ted's point, is you have a dilution of skill set, I think, when you have all these arguments in place, as opposed to, you know, having a conversation of consistent to then accurate. And now we're at a place where it's just criticism. It's just everybody on the sideline criticizing, as opposed to looking at what is actually being done, how difficult it is, and celebrating that. The worst umpire in the major leagues is one of the, how many are there in the major leagues at any time, Ted?
76.
Okay, so the worst umpire in the major leagues is one of the 76 greatest umpires on the planet. Take your human population, divide that number by, divide 76 by that, and you're going to find an infinitesimal amount of talent that exists back there. And so as much as we have a confrontational kind of existence and a push-pull with umpires, you have to imagine just the elite skill set that those guys exist in, and they're on an island. Nobody's for them when they walk onto the field. There's a reason that, you know, the Imperial March from Star Wars is played. Like, the fans are against them, the teams are against them. Oh my God, we got this guy behind the plate. And you've already convinced yourself of something adversarial, when in fact, the old way, and I don't mean to sound like an old head, but the old way was, how do I get this guy on my side? Let me get into rhythm with him, and let him get into rhythm with me, and let's go to work. And as a relief pitcher, even more vital, because if I get a spot missed against me, if I get a call that doesn't go my way, it may change my entire outing. And what's bananas is I played for 16 years professionally, and I can count on one hand the number of calls that were missed at the plate that changed the trajectory of an outing for me.
Interesting.
One hand in 16 years.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not coming to defense of all umpires, because some of them are people that I wouldn't hang out with on weekends. But at the same time, I have to respect the elite level of talent, and then, unfortunately, the level of scrutiny that they're under, especially now.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Ted, I'm wondering if you could speak to that a little bit, just the amount of scrutiny these guys get. I mean, I personally do not think it's fair. It's a tough job, man. How do you guys handle that? Seriously, do you just tune it out? Do you just not listen?
Yeah, and you know, some guys handle it really well, and some guys don't handle it so well.
Sure.
And for me, you know, I developed, I constantly worked on developing this superpower of not giving a crap of what people say.
It's a good one.
It was really hard for me, because I'm a people pleaser, and but to just not. It used to be when I went to umpire school, they said, don't read the newspaper the next day after the game, right? Which is funny now, because your listeners are going, what's a newspaper? And then it became, don't watch.
This is the newspaper.
This is actually the newspaper.
Right. And then it was, don't watch Sports Center, because, you know, they love to highlight when the umpires mess up. Yeah. And then it became, man, don't Google your name, or don't do a word search on your name, because the stuff that comes up, even Instagram, sometimes my friends, I think they were just cruel. They'd be like, hey, look what this people said about you. I'm like, don't send me that. I don't want to read it. So you really kind of got to develop this. For me, I felt like the guys I worked with, if they respected me, that was great. If the players between the lines that really know what umpiring is, the managers, the coaches, the players, if they respected me as an official, then I felt like I was doing my job. And I learned real quick that I wasn't going to please the people that sit behind keyboards and write. And then, you know, gambling came into it. And, you know, guys just walking off the field, you know, if you have we've all had controversial games, one-run games, controversial call, the fans are all upset. I understand that. But, you know, I'd have an 8-2 game that was one-sided, no controversy, walking out of the stadium, some guy just screaming at me because he had the over-under of 10 strikeouts, and I didn't, you know, on the 9th strikeout, I balled a pitch that should have been a strike, and now he's screaming and yelling. And so it just became every game was so much feedback. But to answer your question, I try to develop that superpower of not caring. The tough part, you know, is when your mom reads stuff or your kids read stuff. And that's when it's, you know, they go to school the next day and it's, hey, I read this morning, your dad sucks. You know, it's like, you know, coming back from school. But, you know.
That's why I retired before my kids could read.
Yeah. Well, I taught my kids to box. And
That's smart. That's smart. You know, I want to switch gears a little bit. You had a lot of career highlights, you know, Maddox's 300th win, not to mention, you know, the 2 perfect games. You were on the field for another perfect game. You were behind the plate for, what was it, Irving Santana's no-hitter, you know, World Series, playoff games, all-star games. But I personally love watching a guy I love watching an umpire run a manager. It's just one of my favorite things, always has been. And you tossed Bobby Cox for the 132nd time, which was his record-breaking ejection. So I know there has to be a story there, and if you would share it, I'm all ears.
Yeah, no, I'd love to tell it because I love Bobby Cox. It's funny, the managers that people think are controversial, like Lou Piniella, Bobby Cox, people think, oh, umpires must hate them. No, we love them because we knew they would get ejected for a reason. They would put on a little show, and the next day it's like nothing happened. It's like you're best buddies again, and that's the way baseball should be. I think that is lost. You'd run a guy, the next day you'd kind of laugh about it, or a player would apologize, or an umpire would even apologize sometimes. Hey, I looked at the replay, and then it was let's play ball, and that's the way Bobby was. And so I'll take you back to that night. It was an August Atlanta night, smoking hot as usually is in Atlanta. So yeah, it's just brutal.
Playing in a bowl of soup.
Oh yeah, it was, and it's one of those games. If I called it a ball, people were arguing every pitch. If I said it was a day game, they're arguing saying it's a night game. But it was San Francisco in Atlanta. I rang up Chipper Jones, bases loaded, 3-2. Looking at the replay, pitched a little bit inside, but and Chipper was not happy. He kind of fired his helmet and his bat, which I probably should have ejected him there, but he was cute about it. He made sure not to is he mad at himself? Is he mad at me? Let's make sure here. But and then Bobby. So 2 months before we had been to Atlanta, and the clubhouse guy said, "Hey, Bobby's only 2 ejections away. Maybe one of you guys will get it this series, and." So now 2 months later, we're back there, and I thought for sure the record would have been broken by now. Bobby's never gone 2 weeks without getting ejected twice, right? So between innings, he's yelling at me. He's doing this. If you look at the video, he's telling me the pitch is that far inside, and I said, "Don't do that, Bobby." And he did it again. So he's ejected, and this is between innings. And I think the fans were expecting this big show of throwing a base. Of here's one for the record books, right? We're going to do this, right? But it was actually very mild. And he came out, and we had a very civil discussion, and then he left without much fanfare. And I feel like I cheated, and I apologize to the Atlanta fans. I know they're everywhere. I really cheated you of like a big grand ejection because they didn't even know what happened on the TV. And they came back from the commercial break, and they said, "We think Bobby Cox has been ejected. We're not sure." And so and they showed the replay. So yeah, very mild, very meek, record-breaking ejection. And so yeah, my apologies. But we love Bobby. Many times I remember I was with Tim McClelland in Atlanta, and Maddox was pitching, and he wasn't happy, and Tony Randazzo ejected him. I went down to go to the bathroom between innings, and Bobby's down there smoking a cigar, looking at the lineup cards. "Hey, Teddy," he goes, "Hey, tell Tony sorry, I'm just sticking up for Greg, and where you guys going to dinner?" He made sure he'd send a bottle of wine over. Those are the type of things that, he got it. He was a player's manager, and he made sure too that the umpires knew that he respected them. And that's, Billy Martin. I love talking to the old time umpires. When I came up, I worked with Don Denkinger, Larry Barnett, Jim Evans. These guys came to the big leagues in 1969. And, they would talk about Billy Martin. They loved Billy too, because he would, be fiery, but then the next day he acted like everything was okay. But an example of someone they didn't like was Earl Weaver.
That doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, Ken Kaiser would, anytime I wanted to fire me up, I would say, "Hey, Kenny, tell me about Earl." And he's like, or I'd tell him, "Hey, I talked to Earl the other day. He said you were wrong." And it's like, "What? Get him on the phone." He wasn't. So, so you had Martin and Weaver, 2 guys that were fiery, and then one that they loved and one that they hated.
Yeah. So here's my question. Ultimately, because everybody's seen the Earl Weaver, Ken Kaiser blow up, and if you haven't, do yourself the favor, because that's 7 minutes of pure gold.
Yeah,
it's just 2 grown men just trading punches. And so here's my thing: was it because Earl would constantly scrap, because Billy Martin has that reputation, or was it because Earl made it personal?
Yeah, I think Earl made it more personal, and there was no no, like next day it's over. Let's play ball. It was more like, you screwed me yesterday, you're going to do it again today.
Okay.
He got run at home plate a lot of times. Whereas with Billy, it was like, hey, it's over. Let's go have a couple drinks and forget about it and play ball the next day.
That was because when you were talking about Bobby, I remember playing for him, and I remember once specifically, he ran out and got ejected. Yunel Escobar got picked off of first base, and Yunel gets up and he's starting to go. And as soon as the hands came up, Bobby was out of the dugout as fast as his little legs could carry him to cover for him, just so Escobar didn't get thrown out to protect him. And of those 130 whatever ejections it ended up at total, I'm saying easily 100, if not more, had to be done in protection of another guy.
Yeah,
where he absolutely took the hit. He jumped on the grenade and did that. And I felt like that as a player too. I remember specifically, he'd do it with the press all the time and jump on the grenade. We lost by 10 to Florida in 2008, and it was in April, and we were underperforming. We had lost 60% of our starting rotation to the DL at that time, IL now. And I go in and I read the paper just because I want to know who's saying what, so I know who is a trustworthy source to make a quote to. Yeah. And I look at it, and there's a quote from Bobby. He's like, it's actually one of the better games we played all year. We showed improvement on this. We did this well. We did this well. I was like, we just got beat by 10. I was like, not a lot of improvement if I'm evaluating the situation. As if this guy's bold-faced lying to protect us. I was like, I'm going to play harder for this dude no matter what, just because he's willing to just say this garbage to these people just to get the heat off of us. And that's the type of guy he was. He was amazing.
Yeah, and I'll tell a quick story about Jim Tracy was managing the Dodgers, and Paul LaDuca was the catcher, and I had a play at the plate, pre-replay. So LaDuca's arguing, saying he got him. I called the guy safe, and Tracy came out, argued briefly, went back to the dugout. A couple innings later, another play at the plate, and LaDuca jumps in the air, and before he hits the ground, Tracy is out there, threw his hat on the ground. I ejected him, and he said, Ted, from where I'm sitting in the dugout, I could see that you got both those plays right, but I had to get run or you're going to run LaDuca. I said, you're absolutely right. And LaDuca, after the ejection, didn't say anything, stayed in the game. Tracy goes to the clubhouse. You respect a manager like that because he knew dang well I was going to throw out his catcher. And he jumped on the grenade, like you said, Will. And we respect that as umpires. He comes back the next day, and actually, as he left, I guess he was feeling pretty good because the crowd was cheering, and he went to kick some chalk on me, which, hey, he's going to pay for my dry cleaning if he does that. But he kind of stubbed his toe as he went. He came to home plate the next day with the lineup cards, and he goes, well, that's what I get, Ted. I think I broke my toe. I shouldn't have tried to kick at you. I said, yeah, you were done. Everything was fine. You were leaving. You tried to throw that in there. That's what happens.
He's trying to get a little encore for the way out.
Right.
But I could honestly sit here all day and talk about this, and we'd love to have you back because I know there's a lot more to talk about. But as Will knows, at the end of these, and I believe this was his idea originally, we kind of start a little pitch clock on you and just do 5 little rapid fire questions. And oddly, speaking of umpires, when I was in high school, Phil Cuzzy was one of our substitute teachers. He used to sit there. He would sit there studying the rule book. He didn't care what we did, as long as, within reason. And I saw him at a dinner not long ago, and he said, Chris, well, you know what we do? We call baseball games and we eat. So I'm going to ask you 5 different cities. And first thing that comes to your mind, and do you guys get a post-game spread like the players?
We do.
Okay, so all right. So I'm going to ask you 5 cities, best thing in their post-game spread. First thing that comes to mind. You ready?
Okay.
All right, here we go. Cue the music. Boston.
Ooh, Boston. You know what? You come through the minor leagues eating so many hot dogs that you get sick of hot dogs. But for some reason, I liked the Fenway dogs.
Fenway dogs.
Yeah.
Now this
Fenway
is
Frank.
Fenway Frank. All right. 2 is Cleveland.
Ooh, Cleveland. Cleveland they'd have good steaks.
Really?
They'd have good steak, yeah. You would think more Kansas City, but
Yeah.
Cleveland. Good steak.
Okay. Miami.
Ooh, Miami. You got the Cuban food. I like Cuban food. You got a little Cuban sandwich before the game, a little ropa vieja after.
You can't go wrong there, right?
No.
How about going back to the Bobby Cox theme, Atlanta?
Yeah. Ooh, Atlanta. Actually, Atlanta, they do some. They keep bringing some crab legs sometimes, which you think more of a Northeast thing, but yeah, I remember some crab legs in Atlanta.
All right. And last but not least, San Francisco.
Ooh, San Francisco. Yeah, you usually have good seafood, fresh fish. I know you didn't ask me this, but my favorite, Dallas, the brisket. All-time favorite. Yeah. That could make me come out of retirement.
a little bit of Texas barbecue brisket. Absolutely.
Yes.
Well, listen, guys. Will, thanks for co-hosting this one with me. Appreciate it. I know it's a little last minute.
I don't think I did much.
Well, you did more than you know. And,
well, hey, anytime I get to talk with Ted, I'm happy.
No, that's awesome. Well, listen, and I want to thank Ted Barrett for coming on. Thank you, Ted. That was great. And anytime you want to talk shop, we're here. So, man,
I enjoyed it. We'll get some more stories going the next time. You know, Will's always, you just kind of wind him up and watch him go. And I always love to listen and laugh. So I'm happy to join in on that. Egg him on.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you, Ted. I really appreciate it. So for Will Ohman, Ted Barrett, I'm Chris Vitali, and this has been Totally Baseless. We will catch you next time. Adios, muchachos.